Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Stars, in which the Sharks have managed to win 2-1. Of course, the first meeting here for the Sharks against the Stars this year, so the first time Joe Pavelski managed to play against his old team, and since this game was in San Jose, his first time back in San Jose not wearing teal. And as has been, I guess, unfortunately the case for Pavelski this season, he didn't look that spectacular, but that's not really what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the fact that the Sharks took down the Stars, who have been, many of the Sharks' last few opponents, have been one of the best teams in the NHL recently. They were on a 6-game winning streak coming into this game. And bringing up the point, the fact that the Sharks have defeated some of these really big teams. They had the Philadelphia Flyers earlier on, right after the holiday break, 6-1 victory. That was when the Flyers were really coming in hot as well. They had that victory against the Pittsburgh Penguins, the best home team in the league, also were coming on a win streak. The 2 games against the Blue Jackets, still in this stretch of games here for the Blue Jackets, as I believe they won the game tonight against the Golden Knights. They have not lost in regulation to any team except the San Jose Sharks here in these past 17 games for themselves. The game against the Capitals, while it did end up being a loss, it was one that really got away from the Sharks in the last minute, obviously, so they played a great game there. And then the loss against the St. Louis Blues, they still played decently solid in that one too. So the Sharks have really been looking a lot better since coming back from the holiday break, and this game was no exception. So the first period started off, and it was actually the Stars who immediately get on the board. It would be Jamie Benn, captain for the Stars, just in the first couple of minutes on a power play. But after that, the Stars could not get another one past Aaron Dell. It would be Brent Burns still in the first period who would tie the game at 1 after the puck goes off of his skate, and then Patrick Marleau who would get the game winner in his 1700th game played, and the Sharks would win it, as I said, 2-1. First thing to talk about would be Aaron Dell, as he earns another start here tonight, 3 straight starts in a row, so it certainly seems as though he has taken the reins as the starting goaltender now. Martin Jones not having started a game since his game against the Capitals on Sunday, which we know how that ended. And Dell, similar to the previous game against the Blue Jackets, didn't have to make so many great saves, but there were, I believe, 3 really key saves, and of course one right near the end of the third period, just in the last few minutes. This puck bounces through the legs of Ferraro, that gets to Janmark. He makes this pass to Kimiranta, who is able to get the shot away, but Dell sliding across makes a huge save, and it's something we haven't seen from the Sharks goaltenders enough this season, and it's one of the reasons why now we're seeing a lot more Aaron Dell, is that they really haven't been getting the timely saves, because if this puck goes in, you can't really blame Aaron Dell for a situation like that. This puck bounces past Ferraro, he needs to be able to corral that one better, but when the breakdown does happen, especially in such a key moment, up 1 goal in the last few minutes, Dell comes up with a huge save, which is something that we didn't get to really see enough of from Martin Jones when he had, obviously, this starting goaltender hat on. And so coming up to the game next on Tuesday against the Arizona Coyotes, it would be a pretty big surprise to see Dell not yet again return to the starting goaltender between the pipes and get a chance there, especially in such an important division game. Next, I'll talk about Karlsson and Vlasic. They have been better in the past couple of games, and tonight's was no exception. It was a great defensive effort all around from the San Jose Sharks. They really didn't give the Stars much to work with. Now, again, the Stars, their way of winning isn't necessarily through enigmatic offense, but it's usually through taking advantage of a couple of key moments and limiting what the other team is able to do, and they did manage to do that in this game. The Sharks only had a couple of goals, but the Sharks just were one step ahead of the Stars, and it started with Karlsson and Vlasic. Karlsson in particular, I thought, was very good in this game, especially in the last couple of minutes trying to kill off the empty net. He did a great job, so did Brent Burns certainly, and Vlasic as a whole also had a very good game. Next, I'll talk about the second line. Now, the last game against the Columbus Blue Jackets, I said, was very good. The first line looked extremely strong. Kane, Hurdle, and LeBanc in that game. The third line was also pretty good. But I said maybe that Marleau, Suomelo, and Meyer line was maybe the Sharks' worst in that game. But here tonight, they were potentially the Sharks' best line. They really had a lot going for them. Suomela had a couple of strong moments. Meyer had a very, very good game for himself. And of course, Patrick Marleau. This was at the tail end of a power play. He made one very good play that Karlsson was unable to get the one-timer off of. But just a few seconds later, he got another chance and another game winner here in his long-standing career. And so The first line was still quite good. The third line has been developing, which I'll get to just right after this. But the second line, now playing well, does inspire some hope for, these next few weeks where the Sharks will be without their captain, Logan Couture. And if they can continue playing not just decent offense as they've been getting in these past couple of games, but also very suffocating defense and getting some good goaltending from Aaron Dell, maybe they're not in as much trouble as we may have thought just a few days ago hearing about that injury. And finally, I will talk about Marcus Sorensen. As I said, this relates more to the third line that has been more solid recently, but Sorensen has maybe a bit under the radar, just considering some of the other Shark struggles, has not been playing that well, at least since the start of December. Normally, he wasn't someone who was, lighting it up on the score sheet, but he would contribute here or there points wise, but he always seemed to be a factor night in, night out, and that really hasn't been the case here in these past few weeks. But Sorensen did really pick it up in this game. You could also point to him having a pretty good game against the Blue Jackets in the last one, and it's just been something that's nicely coming forward for the San Jose Sharks. Last season they had that third line of Thornton, Sorensen, LeBanc, and this really was a line that spooked some of the other teams in the league into thinking that the Sharks have this great offensive depth, which of course they did, and the Sharks really haven't been able to find that this season, which was no real surprise. But now with Thornton really returning to that form he was in the regular season last year, with Goodrow having somewhat of a career year for himself, if Sorensen can get back on track, maybe the Sharks can actually have that threatening third line once more, because they certainly got their fair share of chances in this one. In fact, Sorensen had the chance to put the Sharks up 3-1 just in the last few minutes of the third period, just was unable to sneak it through Khudobin. But in the end, that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action, as I said, on Tuesday against the Coyotes. They will technically be looking for revenge in that one. The Sharks have played the Coyotes twice this season already. In the first game, they fell behind 2-0, but then managed to roar back 4-2. However, that was the last game of the month of November, if I'm not mistaken, and after that we know how it went. Then the Sharks, their second game against the Coyotes this season, it was a game that was tied 2-2 before I believe it was Ekman Larsson managed to break the tie in just the last couple of minutes of the third period, and the Sharks would lose that game. So it's a 1-1 on the season series. As I said, important divisional game. The Sharks will look to continue rolling here to get the victory there. Class dismissed.